may be aware that as a child I had some kind of interesting experiences. So part of my growing up was done in the Northern Territory of Australia, that is the north coast of Australia, and particularly in the city of Darwin. Darwin was quite the place. One of the most amazing things about Darwin, I used to refer to Darwin as the Great Melting Pot because, quite frankly, it put most places to shame where that sort of thing was concerned. And so I grew up in a place that was really, really ethnically diverse. I'll put it in those terms. There were a lot of people who were Euros. There were a lot of people who were Aborigines, the original people of Australia, right? And then there were a lot of people from all over the place otherwise. We had Greeks, we had Italians, we had probably Turks, we had people from the Philippines, people from Indonesia, people from probably parts of Africa at times, just people from all over. And I'm talking first generation. We're not talking second and subsequent generations. But that's why I wanted to talk today on the idea of melting pot on the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host, I'm Kurt, and today is Friday the 3rd of September of 2021. Thank you to everyone who's here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube. Welcome. And by the way, remember Rumble is my preferred platform. If I can get you to watch me there, I would prefer that be the case. Obviously, it's your choice to do that wherever you want to do so. And again, the subject today is melting pot. And I wanted to say, well, let me go ahead and get into my notes so that we can kind of work our way along here. But let's just read the notes, and I think you'll probably get the idea of what I'm going to say, even though I may accentuate it as I go. I've said a number of times that the place I consider to be one of the most amazing melting pots I've ever encountered was Darwin in the Northern Territory of Australia. It's fair to say, though, that Darwin is more microcosmic in nature. It's much smaller, even today, much less when I lived there as a teenager, than any major metropolitan area in the U.S. Think of New York and San Francisco as examples. And it holds not a candle to America as a whole. In fact, all of Australia doesn't manage that task. It doesn't do that. The funny thing is, even a relatively small melting pot like Darwin, even in a relatively small melting pot like Darwin, cohesion was supremely important. The Greeks learned to live with the Italians, the natives, and everybody else. And people came to understand just how important it was to have an identity, that is, for the group, for Darwin. To be sure, each group had its own traditions and ways of doing business. That said, it was well understood that you had to live with what was expected of you as a resident of the town in which you lived. In short, you had to assimilate. Again, that didn't make the Palauans any less Palauan. It simply meant there were standards and one had to live up to them just like people anywhere else. This is what I feel is missing, is missing in this country today. I feel it, but I fear it is the point. That's the more significant reality. All right, I'm done with my notes. Here's what I'm trying to get at. The United States is peopled with folks from around the world. We have Turks, we have Greeks, we have Iranians, we have Bulgarians, we have people from Africa, we have people who were brought from Africa as slaves, we have people who came as free people from Africa later on and earlier on. We have people literally from everywhere, all parts of Asia, pretty much anywhere you can name, people from Australia who have come here from there. Even though Australia is a pretty cool place to live in a lot of ways, still there are a lot of people in the United States from there. And so obviously we've got this gigantic melting pot of people all over the place. And I've said before that if you go to Seattle, there are Hmong, okay, who are, I think it's Cambodian and Khmer, right? And in Seattle, in downtown Seattle, and you're going, wow, what are these guys doing here? Well, and there are people from South America, and there are people from Central America, and there are people from Mexico, and there are people from, again, all over the world, not just the Americas, but all over the world. There are Canadians, there are Indian, from India. There are Pakistanis there, and of course Seattle is just another example of a place that's like that. Is it the only place that's like that? Oh gosh, no. The United States is absolutely chock-a-block full with such things, right? Such places. So by no means would you say that the United States was not a great melting pot. But one of the things that happened in the United States prior to, I'm going to say, the 60s or even up to the 60s was that people came to the United States with a recognition that the reason we were a successful country is that we did things in certain ways. It isn't just that they wanted to be American from the perspective of they wanted to fit in. It was that they wanted to be American act like Americans because, for the most part, what Americans did worked. It worked. That's why people knew that the expectation was going to be that they were going to do that. I was married to a Korean lady. The first marriage that I got into, I married a Korean lady, and she came to the United States, and she came to Spokane, Washington, and because there was a military installation there, the Fairchild Air Force Base in particular at that point, because Fairchild Air Force Base was in that place, there was a Korean community, and she stayed largely within that Korean community. She came out to do things like get married. And I'm not saying she would not have married a Korean man if she could have found one. I'm not trying to accuse her of coming out specifically to get married, though I think the benefit of getting a citizenship might have helped kind of prod her along in that direction. If anybody made a mistake in that marriage, I would venture to say it was me as much as anybody. So I'm not trying to get to that point. But the point is, she stayed in that Korean community. But when it came right down to it, largely what that Korean community did was what people in the United States do. They drove cars, they shopped at supermarkets, they worked at jobs, they did the things that we do. They didn't go around killing people. Now, of course, people in Korea don't go around killing people as a rule, so that's not really that big a deal. But there are cultures in which it's normal for people to kill other people. I had friends in Australia who were Papua New Guinean, and their ancestors and their families, some of them were probably headhunters, people who killed people for the meat, if you know what I mean, right? But they were great people, don't get me wrong. I'm not upset or frustrated about them or anything like that. They were great people, got along really well with the people that I knew who were Papua New Guinean. Great folks. My point is, though, they knew when they came to Darwin that they had to act like people in Darwin acted. And in fact, I see this as one of the problems that Afghanistan is facing right now. Various people have pointed this out. And it is, there's not an expectation of a national identity. You are whatever you are, Pashtun or whatever, right? That's what you are. And so many people in Afghanistan do not recognize, they recognize that there's a country, that there are borders, you could argue, but they really recognize their particular tribal affiliation and not much else, right? I'm not saying they don't recognize, like I say, Afghanistan as such. I'm saying that that's not what drives their behavior largely, and that's a necessity if you want to be a cohesive city or a cohesive nation or whatever it happens to be. And this is what I would say about the idea of a melting pot. A melting pot is fine, but if the people within the melting pot do not learn to operate together, they're really not a melting pot. They're just a bunch of little enclaves of various people from various places doing their own thing, and if they get in trouble for it, so be it, and so on. And that's one of the things I see happening in America these days that I count problematic, is that if you go to, I think it's Detroit, there are parts of the city that are basically run by Islamic folks, and in ways that are inconsistent with American law. And that's not appropriate. It's not appropriate. For them to be able to do things among themselves that you could count not the way Americans would do business, so long as they don't step outside of the legal constructs of the United States, that's fine. The second they start stepping out of those constructs, though, it becomes a problem. And that's what I'm saying at this point. Melting pot, great. But melting pots must mold and meld together, and if they don't, they will be failures. They will fall apart. They will lose cohesion, and they will stop being useful, wonderful things. All right, that's what I wanted to say today on the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt, and today is Friday, the 3rd of September of 2021. That means tomorrow will be Saturday. Missed my tea and my notes. The 4th of September of 2021. Thank you for everyone who's been here on Rumble, on the podcast, and on YouTube. Remember that I prefer that people watch me on Rumble. If you want to, you can give me a positive Rumble or a plus on Rumble. You can also give me a negative Rumble if you feel the need to. That would be the minus. You can also hit the boxing glove lots of times for a positive Rumble. You can give me a thumbs up or a like on YouTube. You can give me a thumbs down or dislike on YouTube as well. Again, that's totally up to you. I really do covet your comments because I want to know whether or not the content that I'm putting out there is generally worth your time. So that's, that's really important to me. I just want you to know that people actually take the time to talk to me. And by the way, also feedback where people say, no, you're wrong on this. Yes, you're right on that, whatever it happens to be. Subject for today has been melting pot. Tomorrow we're going to talk on the subject of logic, which I think really needs to be discussed a little bit, because I think there's some people who have some mistaken impressions about what logic looks like and how one uses and deals with it. Hope you're having a good day today. Hope your weekend turns out to be a good one for those of you beginning the Sabbath today. Hope that your Sabbath is a good one as well. Hope that you have a good weekend. If you work this weekend, I appreciate it very much. Thank you for being there, for the likes of slugs like me who need your effort, your time, and so forth. Thank you for all that you do. Again, hope things are going well for you, and hopefully we will see you again on Saturday's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video was recorded on Friday, the 3rd of September of 2021. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.